Good afternoon. It's afternoon now, and everyone is looking forward to lunch. So we'll keep it very crisp and chop. We have four people here on the dais who have all in different capacities and in different areas from public sector, private sector, and academic sector, have looked at the problem of management, and that's today's subject. That's the challenges of management and higher education. I welcome all of you and thank you all for participating in this discussion. If you look at India today, we need about 12 million jobs each year. That's the number of people who are getting into the workforce each year, 12 million. And by the year 2022, one calculation from the government tells us that we will be needing about 578 million jobs in India. These are the jobs which are in different sectors, and these are the jobs where managing this skilled workforce is needed. So as a thumb rule, if we think that in an organization, we need one person as a manager for 10 persons, that makes about 10% of this whole new workforce should be managers. We as a business school and where we are preparing future managers are quite worried about this number, because this is a huge number. India doesn't have capabilities and capacity to train so many managers in such a short time. The second part is that most of the people who are educating themselves to be managers of tomorrow are not looking at the sectors which are really crucial for India's growth. And those sectors are agriculture, where we have more than 30% of employment generation in the next 7 years or so. Sadly, most of our managers would like to join companies like Apple and Amazon, as we were saying, which make only 0.9% of the needs of management students in the future. So that's a huge challenge. So there is a demographic conflict, and there is a geographic conflict right now in India when it comes to challenges of management studies. And how can we prepare for such a massive task? That's the subject we are going to talk about. And I'll start with Dr. Adidam. These are the studies which have been done by Dilip Chenoy's organization, NSDC, and my friends at the Indian School of Business, which I've just quoted. Do you think that we need a disruptive idea to overcome this challenge?
Well, first, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for this invitation to be a part of this panel and at the Jaypee Business School. So, Professor Pachauri, you raise a very important issue as to the fact that there is such a huge need for, I would say, capable managers in the near future as well as, of course, in the long term. And do we have the kind of business schools that can churn out graduates who can perhaps accept such challenges? In terms of disruptive, I think my colleague Deepak Khazanji talked about some disruptive educative models, and let's go beyond that. What kind of a manager, what kind of a product should business schools be launching is the question. And so far from my vantage point, we have basically trained people to think about once you're done with your MBA here, then you will go and work in a company, and you will start at some level and then work your way up, and then eventually join the executive cadre sooner, hopefully, than later. But in America, what I have seen is that there is an emerging I would say, force where students are being asked to think in a very innovative manner, as in, think about yourself as an entrepreneur. Do not, do not consider yourself as a cog in a machine, but think about, can you be the machine on your own? So can business schools recalibrate their education in a way that they can train their students to be more productive, more entrepreneurial, more risk-seeking kind of people? And if we can create an environment where we enhance their behaviors and skills and attitudes to align in that manner, I think we should not have a problem creating students who will end up in the economy and be very productive in the future. So disruptive way, basically we have to make them more risk-seeking and be able to assess the situation in a much different way than what we are teaching right now. And that would be my humble suggestion.
So managing entrepreneurship, we need more entrepreneurship entrepreneurs in the skills area and the management area, rather than the graduates and postgraduates going by the traditional way of our education.
And indeed, that would mean more integrations of the business school with, let's say, the engineering school, or with the medical school, or even with the School of Music and Arts. So basically, pick students from a variety of streams and then enhance their entrepreneurial thinking, and that's what a business school can do to them. So that way, as they are thinking about their future, they are not thinking about getting an MBA and then become an executive trainee at Nestle India or Hindustan Unilever or something, which is fine. I have no problems with that, having myself done that when I was in that situation. But right now, I think, given the fact that we won't have so many openings to absorb all these, the human capital that we have, so we have to then start aligning them towards thinking about being the machine themselves as opposed to being a cog in the machine. So indeed, it comes back to entrepreneurship. That is, yes.
That's great. That gives us some sort of an in on the problem we are facing. Dilip Chenoy is listening very carefully. He's the one who's been crunching these numbers for many years, someone who's been grappling with this problem. Dilip, what do you say to this proposition that we need more entrepreneurs than managers now?
Thank you, and I'd also like to begin by thanking the Jaypee Business School for inviting me for this panel discussion and interacting with all of you here. I think I'd like to add one statistic to what you mentioned. You know, if you analyze the output of management schools and where people from management schools get employed, forget the entrepreneurship bit, less than 7% of the people who get employed from B schools actually get employed in the area of specialization that they specialize in. So just think about it. You know, you're spending 2 years in business school, you specialize in finance, and you don't actually get employed in finance, you go and get employed somewhere else. And one of the interesting things was that we did a lot of work looking at different outcomes of business school. We found that this statistic actually didn't hold much, was much higher in those schools that ensured that people had some sort of work experience before they joined business school. Unfortunately, in the process plant that we have actually developed in India, people in school are preparing for the IIT entrance exam. People in IIT are preparing for their management or CAT entrance exam, and then they end up in this whole process. So the whole education system is actually geared to, you know, clearing one entrance exam. The other, when you come out, you're kind of burnt out and you don't know what you want to do. So I think one of the things that management education and the education system in India needs to look at is this, do we actually emphasize more on work experience before we join management school? And no matter what number you look at, in 2022, the year that you quoted, or 2025, the number of young people that are aspiring for jobs in India will always outnumber the number of jobs in India. So if you don't train people to be entrepreneurs, and the two people to my left are both entrepreneurs, they have started businesses or taken over businesses and given employment to others. So entrepreneurship is a given. And if you heard Professor Amar's lecture, embedded in all of that, that even people within organizations have to be entrepreneurs to enable their companies to actually derive benefit from them. So I believe that management education going forward has to be different. I don't want to take some numbers which Anurag is going to talk about. But the second thing which I want to actually say is that industry and employers also need to look at management schools differently. Because if you don't value the outcome from management schools, then people are not going to value management schools and enter into management degree. To give you an example, I mean, if you go back to the automotive industry from where I spent some time in, MBAs were recruited for selling cars. And when you walked into the showroom, you had graduates doing the same business. Now, anybody entering a private business school would spend X lakhs to actually achieve that degree. And if the return on investment, and if you're going to get 7,000 or 8,000 rupees in your first job, and you're going to be a job where you're doing a job which even a graduate does, then the whole system actually revolts. And then you have lesser enrollments and, and a whole lot of things like that. So if you're looking at the question that you asked, does the management of management schools need to change? Does the business of management education need to change? I believe yes. And the education and the management education system should be finite. And let me end by quoting what I heard Dr. M.B. Atreya actually say in a session where I was sitting. He said, imagine if there was a limit to an MBA degree, that your MBA degree was not valid after 3 years. Then how would you look at learning and education in an MBA school? Just think about it, because when the half-life of skills is decreasing exponentially, where you wake up in the morning to an equivalent body of knowledge created when you were sleeping, that was created till you went to sleep, you have to look at education and management differently. So thank you for the question.
That's very interesting thought, and so we need a sunset clause to the degrees we've all got. And that may spur some sort of entrepreneurship among all of us to do that. And there are two people who have already been entrepreneurs. It's a very simple thing. One manager to 10 people, that's the ratio. And so if everyone who is aspiring to be a manager creates 10 jobs, is the deal done? Then we have enough number of people giving jobs to enough number of employees. And that's how this battle would be won ultimately. Dilip, Cherian, you started as a journalist and then become an entrepreneur. Do you think there is the thinking of our young people, is it increasing towards this trend that let's become employers, job givers, rather than job seekers?
Thank you, and thank you, Jaypee Business School, for this opportunity. To answer your precise question, do you find managers who have the motivation to create more jobs? The answer is no, not quite. I think that a lot of people today are unfortunately even getting degrees which are very expensive, quite happy to find spaces where they can predictably last for 5 years to 7 years. Of course, on the other side, there is the statistic that MBAs don't last in most jobs beyond 2 years, at least for the first 5 years of their career or first 6 years of their career. But having said that, I think that the real problem is that I don't think management education is ideally suited to creating entrepreneurship. I think the skills are very different. And I think that we have to, in my office, I'm very often castigated for using the wrong term, but you need a certain amount of what I call jhadu pocha types, and then you need some people to give orders. Now, unfortunately, both categories of people are extremely, extremely rare to find. Every person who gets a degree thinks he's going to be an entrepreneur or a manager, and many of them, when they exit from schools, actually don't have what it takes to lead people. Management is not about sending orders, it's about leading people. And leadership is something that needs to be taught, I think, in a different paradigm, and not in the paradigm that much of the learning that happens over here in most schools happens. So I'm looking at three kinds of things. Do you have people who can do the jobs that managers want to assign to them? Very often not. Ask yourselves the question, as managers, and many of you who have managed will find that you end up doing jobs that are thrown at you because somebody junior who has been hired by some process is incompetent to do the results that you expect them to give to you. Meaning, whether it's in journalism, whether it's in running an organization, whether it's in management schools, among deans and professors, I think the throughput of work from people is of such low quality that managers spend time dumbing down what they're doing to do what is...
Sell cars, as he said.
That's right. And the other thing is that I think that we also, just to shift the paradigm, we also need to recognize that with deep learning machines, many of the so-called management analysis jobs are going to be out of a job quite soon. It's only a matter of a few years. So when you see that kind of so-called analytical skill being done increasingly by machines with very high efficiency and very low error, then you have to ask yourself, what is the skill that a manager really needs? Is it therefore something more intangible than we are talking about, and therefore should education stretch to provide that intangible, and can it?
Yeah, in artificial intelligence, I think, you hit it on this. On one hand, we are talking about smart cities, and we are talking about a smart society, as Professor Khazanchi just did. And on the other, you are talking about dumb MBAs. So that's a bit of a problem. It's actually a huge problem. You want to say something, but I'll just go to Anurag Batra there. And Anurag Batra, you've been involved in a lot of new age businesses and new age management areas like hotels, hospitality, public relations, corporate communication, the new media. Do you think that we need to push people more and more into these new areas so they have knowledge of doing all the things from jhadu pocha to giving orders?
Thank you, Pankaj. First of all, genuinely, I was telling Dilip that I miss you on television. I'm becoming nostalgic, having me and Dilip having been on your shows many times. So I can see that. So I hope we can, if you want to be back on television, have you back on television. Thank you for inviting me here. And when the first time come to Jaypee Business School, fantastic infrastructure. I went to a business school, unlike Dilip, who saved money. I spent a lot of money of my parents to go to a business school called MBI. I got in the first batch. The quality control was really bad. People like me got in PG. That's how, you know, I have to blame MBI's selection processes were. So I want to tell you that the latest issue of the last, now the healthcare issue, is the B school issue. And it's my favorite issue, not because and this is an issue that, you know, I have crafted, I can take credit for that. And I know a little bit about this domain. I have my friend Amit Agnihotri who runs in my background in the B school. Me and he started extension here together. And now, so I know a little bit about this domain, so I'll answer your question. But I want to say that in India there is a saying, actually in the world there is a saying that in the US and Europe, you decide what you want to do, and then you go to a B school or an engineering school. In India, first you go to a B school and then you decide what you want to do. Second, there's a friend of mine, you can Google it, his name is Paritosh Sharma, he's a young person, he right now works for paying money. And he wrote a piece last year saying, forget an MBA, be a taxi driver. He was talking about Uber, where the taxi drivers are making 20,000 rupees on average. Actually, it's gone up to about 31,000 in a month. And you know, that supports Dilip's point that the employability of these school graduates, and I'm not talking about Jaypee Business School, I met some very intelligent students outside, you know, but a lot of business schools, the quality of people that get in, and hence the quality of people that get out, are really, really not employable. I also want to talk about the fact that in the latest issue of Business World, we got data, don't ask us how we got it, that in 2014 and 15, AICTE approved 49 B schools to shut down, and 41 in 15-16 approved. So there are many more in pipeline. So almost 90 B schools are shut down, right? And of course, AICTE needs to change how it evaluates B schools. It's not just for infrastructure, right? The other thing is these schools are where I call them, these schools produce much below average people, MBAs much below average. Right? And these schools don't practice what they preach. First of all, there's an article in the magazine which talks about a professor from the US who written, what do American B schools and Indian B schools need to do to really adapt to the current environment. And I want to give you a statistic that the India skills, you know, the average age of an Indian will be 29 in 2020 against 40 in the US, 47 years in Japan, and 37 in China. So if our average is 29, but our employability is very bad. The India skills report says that only 37.2% of graduates are employable, right? So those graduates then make it to the B school. So it's really we need to change the education system. So coming to your new age career, I was really impressed by Dr. Amar. I don't have a permanent head damage. I'm not a PhD yet, but someday I'll have a permanent head damage like you and him. But you were talking about visualization. You know, in my entrepreneurship talks and where I use this video called the 1 pound fish man and how he believed in himself. He's not a good singer and he got somewhere. I used this video last lecture of Randy Posh, where whatever you visualize, whatever you believe happens. So you're talking about it. Now coming to Pankaj's question of new age career. Why do you have to just be a technology guy or a PR guy? My friend Papa CJ went to the SAD Business School in Oxford. He's a stand-up comedian. He makes about 6 crores a year. He's doing what he loves and loving what he does. So why do you have to be second, my friend Ira Trivedi, who I for the second time met at your lunch, whatever, IC, thali, thinking lunch, whatever you call it. I mean, she's a hustler. She went to the Columbia Business School. She's an author. So why do you have to go to a B school? Is about the environment, it is about learning. In some cases, it's about being part of a club, right? It's a filter. But after that, it doesn't matter where you're from, right? So, and it doesn't. So clearly, there are new age careers. And entrepreneurship is it. And I wrote this in my piece in my entrepreneur magazine 3 years back. What is the similarity between entrepreneurship and sex? Sir, I will get them. You did, but I will. Yes, no problem. I know it is in Pasha government, but I think they are allowed. It's a tolerant society. So what is the similarity between sex and entrepreneurship? Since Dr. Taylor talked about. What is the similarity? I know I'm not the anchor. The similarity is in a lot of, like the similarity between sex and entrepreneurship is a lot of people talk about it, but very few people do it, and very few people do it well. And they do it for the right reasons. So, Dilip became an entrepreneur, super successful. I'm not kidding. When I started my first media company with Amit, I have two people I looked up to, PG. He's a pioneer. I built a B2B media company looking at what he does. And Dilip, I have taken his help over the last 10 years. So they love what they do. It's not about how much money they make, but they love what. Just choose what you love. And then you don't have to work as Confucius said, right?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good one. And you also introduced our next panel discussion, and Pradeep Gupta is here, who's been a serial entrepreneur, and that's makes him a serial whatever you say.
I know.
Also, if he gets to do it, if he has time. I just met last week Professor Hagi Rao of Stanford. You must have heard about him. He's a byword in theories. And he was talking about that evening about two kinds of approaches we have in the world. One is the air warfare approach, where you are bombing things, and it came soon after Bush administration decided to bomb Iraq. And the second one is boots on the ground approach. That's the engagement approach. When we think about leadership, and people these days are confused about whether we are trying to produce managers or leaders. I think they are two different animals, but people say we are not producing managers, we are producing leaders. Now, Lalu Prasad Yadav is a leader of this country. Can he manage his state? I mean, that's a question. So leadership and management is doing, Peter Drucker said very famously, management is doing things right, leadership is doing the right thing. And are we doing the right thing? Are we looking for solutions, and we are trying to impose them from the top? And that's why we are facing this problem.
I would like to, at this moment, say that I do have a keynote address coming up in this afternoon. And unlike Deepak's keynote, hopefully it will be free of any technical glitches. I don't have any video, so that's a good thing in that. But those are some of the topics actually I will be covering, so I'm not going to steal my own thunder right now. But the leader...
Teaser. This is called the trailer in India.
The teaser and the trailer, indeed.
Yeah.
But I'll definitely say this, that many business schools aspire to create leaders. And leadership is not just setting up a theory of frameworks and ideas and skills and giving them to the students. It is about also allowing the student to understand his own self or her own self and the identity as well as where they come from, and to connect their inner self with the skills. And that critical connection is not taking place in business schools. We are giving them all the frameworks, but we are hoping that they themselves will perhaps connect those frameworks with themselves. We are not doing that, and that is one thing I'll be talking about as a very, very important thing that business schools should start doing. The other thing I want to address our colleagues' point about, as more and more analytics kind of things are taking over and machines are analyzing data, and therefore maybe we don't need humans to intervene. And that's a concern, I guess, which is legitimate in many ways. But I was reminded of what happened a couple of weeks ago in Chennai with all the floods and all. And one of the industries which has tremendously automated many decisions is the airline industry because of the perishability of their seats. So the yield management, as we call it, as we all know it, basically there is all complex algorithms that go into place before we decide what should be the price of the flight seat between these two point to point and so on and so forth. There's a demand-supply issue at the higher level. But anyway, because of what happened in Chennai and all the floods, people were trying to escape to Bangalore and then from Bangalore to Delhi. But all the algorithms, what happened is that instead of a ticket price being around 7,000, 10,000 rupees, it suddenly went up to 100,000 rupees. Now, is that the time to exploit then the circumstances that people find themselves in? Well, the algorithms came up with the answer. They are agnostic about this human sufferings, I guess. They are just algorithms. So that is where the human intervention definitely was required, where they should have gone in. They should have looked at the holistic aspect and said, okay, fine, forget the algorithms, all of that is there. So while we are perhaps moving towards a circumstance where all the decisions might be made by machines using a variety of algorithms, I think our business schools should still embed those values in our students so that they can work along with these algorithms and provide and connect much better with the customers. From a marketing perspective, it's an axiom, it's a corollary in many ways that if you are engaging your customers in a better manner, they will stay with you, they won't go somewhere else. The same thing with business schools, that's the same thing with companies. So I think, again, we have to think about the fact that humans are needed, jobs are needed, we don't have jobs, then what do we do? That's what my original thought of entrepreneurship came in. And now business schools, believe it or not, whether I think Anurag mentioned about something about much below average. Yes, there are those business schools. That's the part of being in an ecosystem, and therefore Darwinian theory of evolution comes here. So those business schools which are able to offer a better service and product to the student will definitely shine, and therefore they'll be much above average.
So social angle to management. So I think at JBS we should think about increasing the credits of our social entrepreneurship in a curriculum. So that would be a good thing to instill that. That's a good idea. There is something about that air warfare which I talked about. I'll take it to Dilip Chenoy later, but you wanted to intervene.
There's a piece in the business world by Dr. Sunil, since there are professors there from US. I mean, what's happened in the GTS? The problem is there is a crisis of leadership in most B schools. I can talk about MDI. Last year there was a leader of, I'm the chairman of the MDI alumni. There was a crisis in MDI on leadership. And I can say that openly. For those of you who go to B school, right? What happened in GSB? A dean of a school had an affair with the lady who teaches a course in power and politics for 26 years. And then, so there is a crisis in these schools itself of leadership. And I want to say that. I know it's a little honest comment. I'm not talking about your school, but I genuinely believe these schools do not practice. I've been looking at B school surveys for 21 years. I went to a B school. I have gone to practically every B school in India. I didn't BJP. So I think you talked about data. B school professors are so close to feedback. So close. We are a company. If I don't need my target, my investors, I have to report to them. So
I think Professor A.D. Amar's theory about rewards, I think, should come there. The reward should not be from top, and the reward should be internal, and that's a good one. Dilip Chenoy, I just want to come back to that air warfare again. Are we, and take his simile and his of Chennai, we are looking at a flood of people who are looking for jobs. Okay? Seriously, how do we prepare for that? How do we deal with that? This is the same situation. Are some people going to profit from that, as they are already started doing? You have a whole lot of unethical practices coming up. People are talking about it. The government's, the employment exchange system has crumbled. And so how do we deal with this flood of people who are getting into the workforce?
I think that there are two questions in that. I just thought, I was just sharing, I think Dilip, Dilip wanted to actually say this.
The problem of having two Dilips on the same panel.
But if you take the question that Professor talked about, that algorithm, so we were just discussing management is actually creating that algorithm, and leadership is knowing when to override it. So that's what we actually we're talking about.
Yeah.
But on a different thing, if you look at management schools and you look at the education, unfortunately, Indian tradition or most things have education systems as gurukuls, right? So if I do it, this is the educator or the teacher leading this and creating a roadmap for students. I think if I talk to all of the students who are here, first of all, I don't know, if I were to ask all the students here, how many of you would prefer a one-year MBA or believe that you can actually do your MBA in 1 year than the 2 years that you spend on campus? So if you just, the students, just raise your hand. So there's your answer. So a lot of kids today believe that a 2-year MBA is just 2 years too long. Okay? The second thing is that the education system has to now become more student-centric rather than teacher-centric.
No, learner-centric, as we just saw it, yeah, learner-centric.
It's not going to be a Gurukul, it's actually a Shishya Kul. So where the students feel cool in a different way and have the ability to get a range of skills that enable them to get value for money. I mean, each of the students here has, you ask them how many years have you invested in getting an MBA? He'll say 2 years. It's actually 19 years. You tend to forget the amount of time you spent in school. So the whole thing has to shift. And I think the question and the one thing that the MBA schools in India and the technology schools in India could do is how do you look at creating jobs in India? Because as the world ages, you will have Japan creating robots to serve you in restaurants. So if you import that technology here, we're going to reduce the number of jobs. But I think the challenge in front of all the management students who are here is how do you create a set of industries and processes and systems that actually can give meaningful jobs to the people that are going to join the workforce. Otherwise, you're going to have a society where there are a lot of dependent people and very few creating economic value, right? And that's going to make life, the whole ecosystem, even difficult for us to live in because you'll see the increase of crime, you will see the increase of other aspects, and I think you should
Social
look,
destabilization.
you should look at,
So that's the boots on the ground approach, as opposed to the air warfare approach. That you go to the students and ask them what they want to do, and design your curriculum, design your teaching according to the learner, and not according to the UGC. But there will be a big problem to deal with the UGC there.
Yeah, just one line. I think the challenge with business schools is that every year you don't know who's going to join you because the method of intake is such that the reputation of your school determines who chooses your school and what ranking. So business schools have to reinvent themselves every year that focus the students. You can't say this worked last year, this is going to work.
We are not reinventing. We think we are a startup business school. So we are doing new things, and which are going to happen very soon. This is part of them, panel discussions and getting ideas from people who are knowledgeable. Dilip, Cherian, 2-year MBA, 1-year MBA. Now we have business schools like the ISB, which has 15-month program, and you do it after 5 years or 6 years in industry. Do you think that's the way forward?
I'll take Dilip Chenoy's idea and what you've said about airdropping and stuff like that. But the way I see it is that if you're really serious about creating a new class of entrepreneurs, which you recognize is the need of the day, besides leadership, which I already talked about, what is the one quality that an entrepreneur needs to have at the very beginning? It is the ability to get up after failure. Now, look at people who claim that they have new apps and new widgets which they create and they're going for angel funding and private equity funding. Do you know what the percentage of people who actually get funded is? About 2% to 3%. So I think that while I accept Dilip's idea of a 1-year MBA, it's a great idea, I think it should be flexible between 1 and 3 years. Create a microcosm where people can come and experiment with a level of fearlessness. If you can create that ecosystem, the best who fail, get up, succeed very quickly, get out in 1 year. The others will just take longer to cope with failure. It's very tough to cope with failure. Can you imagine going back and telling mom, I failed? So if you don't create that, in a sense, it's a life skill. Can it be taught in an institute? That's a question which I can't answer. But it's a life skill.
I think that there could be something between 1 year and 2 years, that 1 year you are doing and you integrate it in a way that equivalent of a year you are studying theory, and equivalent of a year you are training or doing something.
Training can't be in a structure. You must train your
unstructured training.
Slightly, open training, open-ended, which is difficult. Right? I'm not saying a brave B school will attempt to do something like this. But I think schools are beginning to experiment with this, not in India because of the draconian rules that pretend to regulate us, but I think it's necessary.
That's the innovation will come there, that you have to consider the regulatory system as well as the needs of the student.
The University of Nebraska Omaha's Business School, our MBA is, there are two kinds of MBAs. One is the executive MBA. That is a structured 18-month cohort MBA. So you come in and you get out, and all the 20 students, they go lock, stock, barrel together through the 18 months. But the other MBA, the larger one, which we call as the regular MBA, that is left to the discretion of the student. It is the student who decides how fast they want it to be done or how much time do they want to take. If you plan to take 4 courses per semester, you could be typically done in 1 calendar year and be done with it. That is attractive to our international students who come there. In 1 year they can be done and then return back to their home countries and start a business or join a company or whatever they wish to. But most of our students are already working in jobs. So all our classes are in the evening from 6 to 9. For those students, they come, they take courses and then they absorb it, they go back to their organizations, they try to implement it. So there is a very good interface between the institution as well as the industry, and that enriches the learning environment. So in many ways that becomes very learner-centric. That kind of a model has worked very well across business schools in America. I do not understand why that cannot happen in India, because whenever I ask that question, they always come up with some acronym called AICTE or something of that sort. And that apparently prevents or prohibits some experimentation of sorts. But be that as it may, that has worked very well with us, where it is the learner-centric idea and approach, and they decide how long they want to take. Recently, I had a student who was finishing his 6th year in our MBA program. Of course, he was not taking courses every semester, but at the end of 6 years, he has a company in place. He has 40 employees that he has started employing, and he's on the path of doing very well. And he credits that to our MBA program, which we are very happy
Flexibility.
to accept.
Okay, yeah. Flexibility, and that's what we need in education. Unfortunately, the time is not flexible. So, okay. Meanwhile, you be ready with your questions, sir.
I'll tell you, I can see students, and I'm glad you're participating. Lots of students just, it's a big honor. Right? When I was in the B school, I was in charge, I was the head of my placements. At that time, India was not as well known as it is today. So I used to go to Bombay, make kind of pitches to institutions. So in some way, it laid the foundation for what I did. I was the head of the organizing, mural at the school, bringing guest faculty, bringing, guest speakers. I do a lot of events. If I go back, that's still life. So when you're in the school, you could be assistant director or professor in something that adds to your skill, but adds to the school. So, you can actually bridge what Mr. Chenoy and Mr. Cherian and Professor are talking about. So I just wanted to say. And ROI is very important. For the first time in 6-7 years, FMS is in the top 10. Because FMS fee with so little. Yes. Other business schools charge 8 lakh rupees. FMS charges some ridiculous less than 1 lakh. So the ROI on this is So I think these schools have to reinvent themselves.
Well, that's the consensus.
I'll just add one statement about the rather the skills gap that we kind of want to talk about. What we found, at least in America, and I do not know how the situation in India is, so I'll defer to my colleagues here on that, but in America we found that there are 4 gaps that exist. The first is the time management gap, second is conflict management gap, the third is the rewards management gap, which Professor Amar kind of alluded to in his talk. Students, they are still unable to figure out what kind of rewards would be more appropriate to the context. And the last one, the gap that we found is the averseness towards risk gap. And those are the 4 gaps that our MBA program has actively tried to address in the last, I would say, 3 years. And perhaps we could do a similar inventory of gaps in this context, in this country. And if your MBA program addresses those head on, then you can clearly differentiate yourself from all the other, I'm assuming, 20 business schools.
We can assure you that one gap is the learning and teaching gap. That also we have to find some innovative way to do that and new ways to do that. You wanted to add to that, Dilip.
I think, Professor, you make a very valid point that, the skills gap, and I think even in Professor, our thing, you had the CAP, creativity, professionals and analytical, the 3 skills that you listed out on your slide. But one of the things which I would very urge business schools and managing professors in this space to do is that, we analyzed 1,654 job roles and we developed competency frameworks for that. And what is analytical in the pharmaceutical industry is not necessarily analytical even in the life sciences industry. I'm taking 2 very, very close. So, what we've done in business schools and management schools is generalize skills and trying to actually straight-jacket approach, whereas you need a cafeteria approach and a more focused approach. And that's what's lacking. When you look at the focused approach and then you link it to the student-centric thing, you actually come out with a different set of solutions than if you look at it in the straight-jacket.
Thank you. That's a very good idea. And we at JBS can promise the panel that we'll try to address all these things. And we are starting to address these things by using innovative ways in teaching students. And our next experiment is going to be talking about macroeconomy through the next union budget, in which we are going to participate with the national channel. And our students would be giving us, and faculty would be giving us analysis about the next budget. And you'll see it very soon on a television set near you. We are just going to do that.
To ask each student to be the CEO of a company.
They are going to do it. They are going to. They are going to analyze it. They are going to propose.
You can,
and we'll take it to the.
You can actually start.
Before the budget. Before the budget.
This is what I would like to see from a policy.
Our coverage is starting on January 15th.
Good.
And we are giving them 6 months. And then we'll do the assessment. Happy? Okay. Questions? Sir?
I was going to just make a comment, but
Yeah. We'll give you a mic.
that's fine. I can speak louder. But I was going to suggest that maybe we are not going far enough in reconfiguring business education. I mean, I think that all of you are saying that the output is not directly correlated to the input, and the process by which the output is produced. I mean, my suggestion would be that we reconfigure the whole management education model and make it more, I would say, like threads. So you have life sciences people who essentially learn accounting, finance, marketing, those traditional things, IT, in the context of that thread. So you have education that is personalized to the extent that you are actually creating a model for them to go through the different components of that in the area that they want to ultimately contribute. Isn't that, would that be an alternative?
You want to run an NGO, and you won't learn it anywhere unless you run an NGO, and there should be a program for NGO CEOs. And they are enough now, I think.
Great approach.
Yeah, great. Any other question?
But we are already seeing that, for example,
Yeah.
there are this healthcare marketing or healthcare
Yes,
management
yeah.
programs, so they are specializing. But yeah, that's a point which is well made.
I think there's some question on this bench.
Sir, we have 578 million job requirement in coming future, but still colleges focus more on generating entrepreneurs. That is more job givers. Why?
Because only job givers can provide those jobs.
Sir, we have job requirement, that is 578 million in coming future, and we can't fulfill those requirements. And with,
No. I think you've made your understanding is it's 578 million people who will want jobs, not a shortfall. It's the opposite.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to get kitchen to produce food, right? Simply being entrepreneurs to create organizations, to create jobs, right? I mean, Dilip, Chenoy was doing this very successfully for 5 years. And again, he and his organization don't get credit for what they've done. You'll see the impact in a year, 2 years, 3 years, because there is a lag.
Yeah. So any other question? I think.
I think just to answer your question, let me say, there is a requirement for that many people in the workforce, right? The incremental requirement is about 109 million over the next same amount of time. That's hidden in the figures, in the statistics supported. And there are like close to 120 to 130 million people who are going to enter the workforce. So there are going to be surplus people entering the workforce in the number of jobs. And the only way to actually address this by creating more entrepreneurs who can create more jobs so that people can be employed.
thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. I think we have some sort of a blueprint for a further blueprint on how to actually reconfigure management studies, and we will, someone from our faculty will really look at these, and we'll take it forward. That's a promise. And maybe in the years to come, in the next conference we are going to hold, there will be a proper research paper on this particular subject. Thank you very much, and thank you all.
Thank you.